For a little bit more on the latest political development in the country, we're now joined via Zoom by Angelo Fick, who's the Director of Research at the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute. Thanks so much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you. I suppose Mr. Mabuza's resignation is not a surprise. Maybe we're just trying to figure out the timing.
Absolutely, and if anybody had told me in November of 2022 that by February 2023, David Mabuza, colloquially known to many people as the cat who survives political battles, would be out of power, we would have wondered what kind of cloudy crystal ball they're gazing into. But it seems as if the changing dynamics in the African National Congress, Mr. Mabuza is one of those casualties who will exit politics and presumably go off into a quiet retirement.
Where do you think it started to go wrong, if I can use that phrase, for him in terms of this slow exit out of power?
I suspect it was not being able to outmaneuver somebody like Cyril Ramaphosa, who many people continue to see as weak, despite all of the evidence that's right in front of us, and has been right in front of us for at least the last 10 years since 2012. Let's not forget that Cyril Ramaphosa was the man who came out of the Marikana issue quite clean, comparatively speaking, and seems to about to repeat that trick by coming out quite clean from the Phala Phala scandal. But for Mr. Mabuza, I think things started going slightly awry when, in his role as deputy president of both the party and the country, a lot of that time seemed to be spent doing undercover work, so to speak, not having the public visibility that even Cyril Ramaphosa had when he was deputy president of the country. And so my suspicion is that he became outmaneuvered not just by Mr. Ramaphosa, but also by other figures in the party, particularly Paul Mashatile, towards the beginning and middle of last year, as Mr. Mashatile kept his eye on a senior position in the party. And whatever deals were struck, they certainly didn't advantage Mr. Mabuza in the way that many people would have assumed he'd be able to repeat, given how he got into the deputy position precisely by outmaneuvering the Women's League and other challenges, including Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma in the 2017 leadership race for the ANC.
He seemed to have such a stronghold of his province in Mpumalanga for so long. What happened there? Was it, again, maneuvers from outside the province that convinced his following inside the province that there was a new way?
It may have been that the removal from the province into what looked like a promotion into the deputy presidency may have, prevented him from keeping his hand quite as strongly on the province as he did when he was premier. Let's not forget that Mr. Mabuza also spent a lot of time traveling beyond the equator, presumably to places like Russia, the Russian Federation. And so there may have been other issues that he was attempting to deal with in order to strengthen his position. But in politics, always, anywhere in the world, including in South Africa, and particularly, I suspect, in the ANC in its current phase of transformation and trying to change towards greater survivability chances in the next decade, Mr. Mabuza was perhaps being outmaneuvered by people who had a more sort of agile ability to get themselves into position. And I think he was not the only person to whom this happened. There are many, many people in the ANC who I think survived fairly well in the first 28 years of the party's position in government. And it may be those people may have been, shall we say, outmaneuvered by time and technology, as well as a swell of people in their 40s and 50s who feel that they've waited long enough and no longer want to sit in a party that's governed only by people in their 60s and 70s.
All right, let's talk about the timing. The streets are suggesting that this reshuffle is happening imminently. We've got the State of the Nation address on the 9th. Is it likely that this thing will happen then definitely before the State of the Nation address, and his resignation might be prompted by a communication he's had with the president already?
Probably. I suspect that the African National Congress would want to go into the State of the Nation address with all of their ducks in a row, given what opposition parties have done. And this includes the EFF's threats, as you've just reported, to make Parliament a very difficult process for Mr. Ramaphosa, but also the Democratic Alliance's recent victory in the court, which the ANC will challenge, around the cadre deployment policy documentation and that committee's, sort of records. But I suspect that we've known that this is in the works because of the necessity of the processes that had to happen between province and the National Assembly, provinces and National Assembly around party lists. We know this from the ways in which particular individuals in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng are being maneuvered to enter Parliament, including Mr. Mashatile, including Mr. Zikalala. And of course, we know that there will be some need to reshuffle the cabinet because of Fikile Mbalula's departure from cabinet, potentially to focus his life and time in Luthuli House, because he's also now the Secretary General of a party that needs to be rebuilt and rebuilt fast. Whether or not this happens before the State of the Nation address or whether it happens, shortly after it, remains to be seen, because it's not just that the internal dynamics of the ANC and the internal dynamics of governance in notification to the National Assembly and to various provincial premiers have to be made. It's also that the governing administration has to keep their eye on what kind of consequence this is likely to have for the way in which South Africa is read, both in terms of economics and political stability.
All right, we'll talk about the potential cabinet just now, but maybe as a final question, is this the end of the political career of David Mabuza?
Who can say? As I said, if you told me in November that Mr. Mabuza would, be out of the position in February, and it seems as if February in South Africa after any ANC conference is a time of, waning fortunes and rising stars. Let's not forget Valentine's Day 2018, when Jacob Zuma was removed from the presidency of the Republic of South Africa, and Cyril Ramaphosa came in, having been elected at the December conference of the party. And one can never tell. Mr. Mabuza may return to some supernumerary role elsewhere in the party. He may find himself deployed to an ambassadorship, or he may just enjoy his retirement. I think it isn't entirely predictable what people who exit politics in the ANC end up doing. After all, it's in the Free State that they once had a premier who, upon resignation, ended up not going to the National Assembly as a member of Parliament, but ended up working as a scrub nurse in the local hospital. And that, I think, is an indication that anything is possible in this dynamic organization, and has been for a long time.
As far as the reshuffle is concerned, there's one that's going to happen. What kind of pressures is the president under now? Because I suppose there are many people who are saying, listen, you've got to show strength now. You can't have those people that literally stood up against you in that cabinet. And at the same time, has he got full control of the NEC? What is he dealing with when he's starting to put this cabinet together?
So I think there are two issues here that need to be dealt with. And the one which I'll address later, presumably, is what South Africans would like and what South Africans require. But the first thing the president has to deal with is he has to articulate for his party, as president of the party, the message of unity that he keeps speaking, but unity with a curtailed set of followers, people who very openly defied him and brought what presumably was his presidency of the party into disrepute with their remarks all of 2020. Will have to be dealt with. And this includes, what does Cyril Ramaphosa do with a figure like Lindiwe Sisulu? The second issue that arises is, does he get rid of people who are likely to oppose his second administration's policies? And that includes this policy that he has about trying to de-corrupt the state because they have much to lose by it. So it's not just did they vote to get him removed on that Tuesday in December, did they oppose him all through 2022 in terms of the ANC's internal election processes, but also will they be dead weight and will they be anchors holding the party's prospects in 2024 down if he keeps them around in positions of power? And so what will count as building unity in the ANC is a very, very difficult task, because if this were, let's say, 1999, there would be a different issue at work. Here, this is a party whose own research says it's very unlikely to get 50 plus in 2024 unless it works very hard. This is a party that is trying to get back control of municipalities, including, some in the wealthiest province in the country, the economic heart of the country, Johannesburg, which it sort of got back with this interim arrangement, and it's trying to get back Ekurhuleni. So this is a party that wants to, from its Gauteng base, reassert itself as a party of governance and government, in order to signal to ordinary people that it wants to govern in 2024. And in order to do that, Mr. Ramaphosa may have to streamline the National Executive Committee of his party into standing behind him and his vision, and suggesting or convincing them that he is the candidate who can win the election for them in 2024. And if that plan is to include people who've, undermined his authority in 2022, that's a very hard ask, because he will then appear to the public as rather a weak character. What the South African public may need, I think, is a leaner and meaner cabinet, which Mr. Ramaphosa promised us 5 years ago when he first started thinking of the presidency. And it's also, I suspect, what South Africans want is the old wood gone, the people responsible for the Eskom crises, who sat in control of portfolios that saw the Eskom crisis unfold, and people who really haven't delivered in any of the portfolios that they've been sitting in for at least 10 years, sometimes 15 years. And that's a hard ask, because Mr. Ramaphosa has to reward people that's on his side, some of them sitting in cabinet and saw him to the presidency, and now may have to be removed if the electorate is to, gather to the party 18 months or so from now.
Angelo, we've run out of time, unfortunately. We didn't even get to the EFF, but there'll be plenty of time for that for sure. But thanks so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much, Peter.
Thank you. All right, that's Angelo Fick, Director of Research at the Auwal Socio-Economic Research Institute, ASRI, speaking to us about David Mabuza's resignation, what it means for the president, and a possible cabinet reshuffle. And all of that, of course, State of the Nation address, which the EFF has promised he'll fail to deliver. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out.